Call to order the work session for 6:10. Go ahead.
Yep. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for meeting early tonight. Appreciate the time that we're always able to get. Typically, the beginning of June is always our beginning of budget season discussion. Try to keep it pretty consistent year over year, and the idea is always to make it a shorter budget season, but we did some information and math over since we talked last at the last council meeting to get some direction from council, and we need some more direction from council based on what we came up with. So I'll go through just some background preliminary things just for residents and for also for council members that may or may not know. We talked about this before, but the levy is the actual tax dollars that are given to the city in a year to operate, whether that's for capital purchases, operations, future planning, what have you. This is set in December of each year and cannot be adjusted. So we can't adjust it until the following December, no matter how much changes happen in the community. There's new homes, new businesses. They don't adjust the levy dollars that actually come into the city. They just adjust how much every person proportionally pays. Tax capacity is the value of all of the properties within the boundaries of the city. Growth or change in those values adds to that tax capacity, which then divvies up that tax levy more equally. And more growth does not always mean more dollars, but it does mean that the tax revenue dollars are spread across, which I had mentioned. The tax rate is that resulting number of those two. They are not one for one. There's a percentage points, but it's very similar. You can say the tax rate or the tax capacity went up X percentage. If the levy goes up that same percentage, typically it's pretty close, where tax rate would stay the same. The tax rate is what actually calculates your taxes that you pay on your house based on the value. As an example, I do this every year just to show you what the differences are. That I just go very, very high level. If your tax levy in year scenario one, we start off with tax levy in year one is $4 million, and a tax capacity in year one is $10 million. That means there's no levy increase. If we go to year two, we have more $4 million of change, but we double our tax capacity. The tax rate in year two is 20%. Average home bill would be $1,000, whereas in year one it would be $2,000. We have the same tax levy increase, so essentially we match the two. We would have $5 million in tax levy increase, $20 million in tax capacity, or a 25% tax rate, and that's $1,250 average home bill. And then if we match the levy with the growth, we have $8 million of tax levy increase, $20 million of capacity, and the tax rate stays the exact same. Again, that's not super simple because we have fiscal disparities in ours and tax increment financing in the calculation. So this is like a dumbed down, super dumb example, but it does work in total and proportion. A breakdown of this year's levy, looking at this year in 25, looking forward to 26. 1% of levy is $88,000. So if we're going to change 88 grand, it removes 1% of the levy in 2026. It's roughly about 0.35% or 0.36%, depending on which way you round and look at it. And then it's about $18 for every average home, and that average home is roughly $525-ish thousand is the average home in Dayton currently, somewhere around there. So this was the tax capacity changes that we saw from 25 to 26. These were updated at the beginning of June, so these are as up-to-date numbers as we can possibly get. The county does update them every single month based on anybody who is challenging their value or anybody who has any changes in their valuation will be updated. Typically, there's not a lot of change after June. There's some change from the beginning numbers that we get in March until June because of people arguing their values and saying, okay, I only have so much of my house done. I didn't do my basement like I thought I pulled a permit on. Yada, yada, yada. They will argue their values. Typically, it goes down from March to June. 8.1% is the number that we saw for 26. After we went through all the levy dollars, so this is essentially where we start at from staff perspective is, okay, we have the general fund, which is operations. This goes into every department head meets with myself. Typically it would be the finance director as well, but as I wear both hats, it's just myself. Sit down and talk about what you're looking for your department next year. Each department head is obviously looking out for their own department as best as possible, figure out what's best for their operations and their department from what they see to serve the residents. The other line items, which are below the general fund, are all for future capital purchases. We always start off with what we had planned on for CIP last year. So as we look at the budget every single year in CIP, we always look at 2 years. Essentially, last year in 24, we looked at 25 and 26. This year for 26, we will look at 26 and 27. So that's why there's a $280,000 increase in capital equipment, is because that was planned on ability to be able to continue to focus on paying for the ladder truck that was approved and being able to pay for that in cash over many years. It was a small increase every year to get to that number, which was in 27 or 28, I can remember when we top out at. But essentially a small increase every year to be able to compound those dollars. So an increase doesn't mean that the previous dollars went away. It's an increase to the total number. So if last year was 100, we increased to 300 this year. We now have $400,000 that's going towards the ladder truck this year. 300 in addition, 100 from last year, plus the 100 from the previous year, so we'd have a total of $500,000 for the ladder truck if that were to go through. Park capital is the same way. We just incrementally increase because we are going to need to pay for new park equipment that can't be paid for by park dedication dollars. And capital facilities reduced to 20 grand, so we had planned on doing a $100,000 increase, but last year during the budget process, we realized that we don't really need the capital facilities dollars. They're utilized there for signs, and we haven't bought a sign in I don't know how many years.
Since
Since the interchange, so it's at least 2 or 3 years. So we have a few dollars in there already that we have not spent, and so we need to either stop allocating dollars to that towards us, or identify projects that are going to utilize those dollars, so we don't continue to tax and just have a bank of not planned out dollars.
Is that only signs, or what
Nope,
else can you
there's
use
signs,
for that?
there's anything related to capital facilities, so that could be used for an expansion of a building, which we're looking at Public Works in a few years in this expansion. It could be used for new facilities overall in total, like a new building. It could also be used for any related improvements of a building, so if it's a parking lot or something similar that has a capital facility of nature, whether that's a remodel too, that could come out of those dollars. We have roughly $1.6-ish million in that fund, and I think it's always important, and we talked about this last year in the budget process, that we have an identified plan if we're going to continue to levy for something. It makes no sense for a city to continue to levy for something year over year and not have a plan to spend the dollars. So I reduced it by 20 grand because 200 grand gives us something to keep moving forward with
How
the
much in there
project.
right now?
It's about 1.6, just short maybe, 1.575, but we'll call it 1.6.
Well, capital facilities money that's just
Yes,
sitting there.
it is sitting there. Yep, there's been identified projects. So we had at one point we had a remodel plan for that was $1.2 million or $1.1 million for City Hall. We didn't do that project. So that was for most of what was supposed to go. We ended up not doing that project. That was in 23 or 24 that was supposed to go. So we didn't do that project. And then we've had a few sign projects. And then there was supposed to be a building for Public Works for cold storage. That was supposed to be about 100 grand. Essentially like a stick pole shed building. That was 100 grand that Public Works said we'd rather have and wait for the Public Works expansion to do something versus spend the money on a cold storage building, and then we still need the expansion, so or we should do it at one time to save the best amount of dollars. So, always trying to look at the best way to use dollars in total is always what city staff is trying to do, and I think that's what the main purpose and goal of this conversation is that we did our best, and we need direction from council on what to look for next. So. This kind of gets into the meat and bones. I'm going to talk about the graphs and give you some pretty pictures and stuff to show on, and then I'm going to actually talk about individual line items, which you've already seen, but I want to talk about for the residents. This is a graph to show where our levy's at compared to our tax capacity. That black line is our tax capacity. The further away that black line is from our bar graph, essentially, the levy dollars that we're allocating, the less the tax rate is. So as you can see, back in 2019, it was about $5 million for the levy, and under $10 million is probably like $9 or $8 million for the tax capacity. Our tax rate was very high at that time, in the 60% range. In 2025, which are solidified dollars and going right now, we're at 35%. So if you took roughly 3 of those bars, you'd hit that black line, whereas in 2019, you take one of those bars and double it, you'd be over the black line, you'd be over 100%. And then we looked at this graph. This was something that was brought up by the mayor a few years ago of what are we actually doing capacity versus tax levy change, and I think it's important that those are broken down in different graphs. So the left graph shows the tax capacity versus the tax levy change, and the red line is the tax levy, the blue line is the tax capacity. Again, they're not exactly the same, but they're close. So if you look at it and say if the red line's less than the blue line, we went down in tax rate. If the red line is above the blue line, we went up in tax rate. Is a general aspect of things. They're pretty close. 25 is actually stagnant from 24. So even though those two lines are not the same, it actually is the exact same because of fiscal disparities. So that was the change there. The right graph shows the tax rate as the last few years. As you can see, there was a significant drop in 23, which corresponds to the graph on the left. Big difference between the tax capacity and tax levy. And we've been pretty stagnant since then. Based on the current levy that's preliminarily looked at for 2026, this is the impact for a home. So if you look at 25 tax value of your value of home, and your 2026 preliminary levy dollars, and this is just the city portion, not county, not state, not school district. On an average home of 534, it's about $195 increase annually, or about $16.25 per month. Based on what I mentioned before, which is like 18.97%. I'm gonna go back just a couple of slides just to show you what that number was. That's based on an 18.97% tax levy increase. So, what I would say is this kind of our top number, and we'll obviously go down from there, but this is where we're at as a starting point. Comparing to other communities is always important, just to know what our neighbors are doing. Not saying that we have to compare to all of our neighbors, but it's good to know where they're at. I did pull new numbers for 25 for each of the communities around us. We are the lowest one of all the communities around us, except for Maple Grove. I don't include Maple Grove because they are an anomaly. With the amount of growth that they see every year in commercial dollars, they can spend pretty much whatever they want, and their tax rate changes $0. So, which I'd love to see here, but that's not the case where we're at today. But our tax rate is the lowest of all the communities around us. I've had preliminary conversation with Rogers so far, and it sounds like they will have another tax rate increase based on what they are seeing today. I don't know what that is. I don't know what the number is. Obviously, they have to have conversations with their councils. June is very, very early. I will typically know what most of those are in August, end of August, beginning of September. And I'm happy to share those with the council once I know what those are planned to be. Comparing, the top graph is the breakdown of tax capacity and where it comes from. So the main big ones are the green lines, which are residential, and then the blue line is commercial industrial. So as you can see, Dayton has more than Champlin and Corcoran in commercial industrial, but we lack in residential compared to Champlin. Rogers has beat us in both categories for those two. The red one is apartment buildings as well, and they have significantly more apartments in Rogers than we do here in Dayton. I do put Maple Grove on the map for this bottom graph, and it's just to show the difference. Not because we want to compare to them, but just to show the capacity numbers and the market value that they have in Maple Grove. 2025's final tax rate for them is just under 30%, but their market value is over $10 billion. So we are just over $2 billion, so just as a relative comparison. Don't compare to them often. Again, they're kind of an anomaly in this area. So. I don't know if I want to go through each individual line item, but I most certainly can. I'm going to hit on each one of the departments. If you have a question on a department, let me know, and I can stop and go through the details of underneath. I will go through the details in a few slides to go through what the breakdown is in total for the general fund. This is specifically focused on the general fund alone, and any other funds. City clerk is an increase of 75 grand. Also, that is related to a hiring an HR manager position. Elections, an increase of 44,000. That is because we have elections next year in 26. Finance is $30,000 increase. That is based on salary and benefit changes and some professional services. Engineering, legal, and recycling, a $100,000 increase. The main one of those is recycling. Inspection department, that's about an increase of 140 grand roughly. Half of that is for a new associate planner. The portion is related to professional services and then current salaries and benefits for employees. And planning department is an increase of 140, and that's the rest of the planner, associate planner position. It's also a large amount of dollars for professional services, and that is related to comp plan work that city staff wants to get underway. We will need assistance from consultants to do that work. We are not sure of the cost because we're not sure what studies we're going to need, but that's where the rough number of 94,000 comes from. Any questions on specific departments? Otherwise, I'm going to go to the next slide. We can hit all of these again. I can always go back.
The associate planner,
Yes.
that looks like about, 98?
Yep,
99,
roughly.
right?
That's
Okay.
with benefits. So if you subtract
Yep.
off about $22,000 is roughly benefits per
That's
employee.
another person over John and Hayden.
Hayden, that is correct, yep.
Why is that under inspection department?
They do some work on reviewing setbacks for decks. They do review setbacks for fences. And it's incorporated in our costs related to inspections for those items when we are charging a permit fee. Currently, we are charging out Hayden's time as a planner 2 for that same cost.
And they go out on every plan?
Nope, they don't do every one. They do a lot of review back in the office here, so they'll do a lot of like review plan sets. They're looking at gradings as well. They'll look at new building permits overall for setbacks and anything related to a new construction home. I use the fences and decks as an example as well, but we see a lot of their work being done with inspections because they are the kind of the first line. It's plans submitted to the city staff, and we will review that right away before it goes to Metro West to make sure that they are in compliance with our code before it goes to Metro West, and they review it for building code.
So, I mean, it sounds like a little bit of an increase in scope, but so they typically, so last year, how did our permits do with the year before?
What do you mean? So number?
Yeah,
Last year our number was 230 something, 234 for 2024. This year we are on track for about 151, maybe 148, something like that for 2025.
Adding another planner allows Hayden and myself to shift to other types of work.
It also allows.
I know that's always the answer. I just want to know that we're not adding inspections
We are not adding additional inspections.
but realized
Four.
inspections. In other words,
yeah.
is this person going to do, is the inspection department going to do more than they typically have?
No. The idea is that we're able to allocate some of the work that a planner 2 is doing, which could be done by somebody who could be at a much lesser salary rate.
Okay.
We can utilize that person's services for something that they could actually be growing in. Also allowing us to complete the comp plan stuff. Part of this associate planner position is to allow for more stuff to be done internally for comp plan items.
Okay, so that's
As
an
a-
additional scope.
That's in the scope, which will be done by John and Hayden, yes. And part of that is because we look back at what it cost us to do the comp plan last time, and it was just over $225,000 to do the comp plan by having all consultants do it. That was the increased cost.
And I'm confused about the new HR manager position.
Sure.
I thought we just added a service, an outside firm to do this.
We will look at that tonight.
That's included in that 73, right?
Yes, so there is a reduction in professional services of 12.5 to be able to offset for some of that HR manager position. But we have some dollars in professional services this year to be able to help with some HR work that we needed to be done, that we figured would happen. It's actually more than 12.5, but that it's an offset for the HR manager position. The reason why we're looking at a full-time person is because we've never had an HR person internally here ever. And so I don't know what work's gonna need to be done or not done based on the consultant coming on board. We have so many hours that we can use with them, and their charges at an additional rate per hour.
But that's 73, that's plus Abdu?
No, we would remove Abdo at that point.
Yeah,
So that's where the reduction of 12.5 comes
Abdo's
in.
36, how much are they?
60, if you do the 5,100 a month.
We're not looking at doing the 51.
Yeah, it was only,
Well, it's on the graph, it's on the.
It's on the graph, yep, it's in, but that's not what city staff's looking for. We're looking just for the lowest base model, just to get us going, which is about
42,
No, it's 30.
30 something.
30 something.
Yeah,
3,500 a month,
yes, so it's roughly for
so that's,
this.
yeah,
which
it's
is
close to 40,
42,000 a
yeah.
year.
Yep, and so we're only looking at, the hope is to do it only for 6 months here for this year, which is half of that, so about 20 grand for this year in 2025. And then look at hiring an HR manager for next year in 2026. We would not have both services, if that's your question, that's not our goal.
No, that wasn't my question, but I understand what you're doing.
Yep.
All the salary increases are at 8% also, correct?
No, not for everybody, nope.
No?
Nope, only staff that are not on the top step. So if they're not at the top step, they would have an 8%, which is your 4% COLA, which is negotiated by the union contracts. And then they'd have a 1 through 7 if they're on a grade step scale system. They would have a 4% step next year as well, yes. But if they're at top step, they do not get another 4%, they only get the one.
How many are at?
We have
top step?
over half of our employees are at top step.
So most get 8%, or 4%.
Yep, most get 4,
4%.
yeah. If we had to say percentage-wise, over 50% only get the 4% union contract negotiated one.
That helps.
The other half are, no, it helps, but then if you look at it from top pay,
It helps.
I'd rather pay somebody at step 1 than I would at step 7, not because because the dollars are way less. I mean, it's on an officer, it's like 30 grand a year if they're at step 1 versus step 5.
Right.
So, yeah, it's top pay is really great to have an officer that has a lot of experience. I use that as an example, but from dollars perspective, a step 1 person's going to be the best value for us. Again, they don't have the value of the experience, but over half of them are at top step.
And that recycling services, that 70K, what is it now?
Oh, what is it now?
So this is,
This is the one we adopted 2 years ago. It was a 5-year contract that we had with Republic that we negotiated. And I think now it's like, I'm gonna say it's 512. I don't know that off the top of my head. I think it's pretty close to that
Is it
per
really?
recycling container. And then next year it's like 540 something, but you multiply that by 4,000 homes in Dayton. And some people have 2, so they can get 2 if they want to. It adds up really quickly, so that 70 grand is.
Will we be renegotiating that when this contract is up?
Yep, we
Okay.
can.
we did last time too, and
Yep,
it was difficult.
it
Okay.
was very difficult,
Okay.
yeah. So that $70,000, and we'll get to it in a second, is almost a required one, because we did the math and said, okay, we paid this much this year, this is how much it is per month. Just take that same number and put the new contract numbers in, and it's 70 grand more. We pay about 250,000, in 26 it'll be about $250,000 a year for recycling. Which, again, you pay for it on your tax dollars, so you don't pay for it out of your pocket, but some people don't want recycling. Some people do want
What'd you
recycling.
say it was for?
It's about $250,000 for the whole year.
And 9% of it actually gets recycled.
That's the problem. If they actually recycle.
Are we good?
I'm
Sorry.
fine.
We can go to the next slide too. There's probably more questions. Like I said, we can always come back, and I'm happy to go back and forth. Police is our biggest one. I know I like to put Paul on the spot, but he's gonna get the spotlight tonight, because increase of $534,000. As you can see, most of that stuff we can't touch, because it's already been negotiated in union contracts, unless we'd like to reopen the union contract up.
When are they?
What do they do? So this is the last year, 26 is the last year of the union contract, and then 27 is another. So 26 will be a negotiation year for us again.
427.
For 27 and 28, yes. We can request to open the contract up, but part of the deal is you open up the whole contract again,
Yeah.
so. We can do it,
Yeah.
but I would say, most of that is, so if you take 534 and you subtract off $130,000, which is the new officer that the chief is asking for, you have $400,000 that's, all baked in to salaries and benefits based on current contracts.
And that's over and above the 2.5 you got now?
The 2 that I got, yeah.
2 that he got this year. That you just approved at the last council meeting. Yeah.
But it's new money because we hired him half year.
You got it. Yeah, and that's the $152,000. You got it. So it's new money for tax levy, but it's not hiring any new people because we hired them at the last council meeting.
No, I'm just, yeah.
Yeah,
But when we did
yes.
that, we kind of locked us in for.
You got it. That's exactly it. So really, of the 534, we had about $130,000 to play with of that dollars. Now, like I said, it's the largest number out there, but it's all pre-negotiated on union contracts. And part of the union contract, I just want to make sure the council's aware, part of it is because the union switched in October or November of 2024. So we only had this many dollars to work with for 25's negotiation, and they said, you can only use this much, that's it. And they said, well, that's fine, but then we wanted to have a split percentage going over both years. So we ended up backloading that contract for negotiations, because they said, I'll use an example here, I don't know what the exact numbers are. It was 8% per year for market rate adjustment or whatever, right? Well, then instead of using 8%, we used 3% one year and then pushed 13% on to 2026. So that's why you're seeing such a large increase that you may not have seen last year in 25, is because the union contract just negotiated and said, yeah, that's fine, we'll forgo 1 year and then we'll just backload it heavy in the next year.
Which union contracts do we negotiate and which ones are negotiated by the state? 'Cause like AFSCME is.
All of them are negotiated by us.
Oh, okay.
So we are in talks with 2 of them currently, and we have 3 union contracts in the city of Dayton. AFSCME, LELS now, they were Teamsters before, and then we have the Teamsters who does the supervisors union.
Which ones are in negotiation? I don't know.
Supervisors union and Teamsters and AFSCME, which is like public works and any office employees. There's only like 3 of us that are non-union in this city.
So they haven't, there hasn't been much negotiation then, I take it.
There has been some negotiation done, but nothing that is gigantic, no. I mean,
Okay.
so there's no been real back and forth with
Okay.
the union contracts.
When do we become part of that?
Once we have an agreed upon, I would call it a tentative agreement, that's what they call it, a TA, is what they utilize in their terms of staff works back and forth with them and then say, okay, we're at an agreement, okay, let's bring it to council, and council will then be able to say, yep, that's not gonna
Yes
work,
or
or
no.
this will work, yep. This will work, that won't work, and then we go back to them and renegotiate if that's the case.
Okay. Seems kind of late.
Our goal is to try to get this to you guys in like July or August, that's our goal.
Okay. I mean, if you've already done a bunch back and forth and then we come in and say no,
You can do that,
you kind of toasted a lot of work.
that's okay.
It happens a lot.
I'm okay with toasting a lot of work if the council's not okay with the contract, that works.
Okay.
We try to do our best to get what we feel is right for both the employee and council and budget dollars, and that's kind of my goal, but doesn't mean I'm perfect at my job, and I'm always open for more criticism. Works out well. That's police. Fire's the next one, increase of 167,000. That's switching back to paid on call model based on conversations we've had so far with the council. The reason for that is because that's the worst case scenario in the budget. I've put in dollars based on $30 an hour for firefighter employees and no full-time staff. So as you can see, it's roughly an offset between full-time staff and the paid on call staff, which is about a $13,000 difference there.
Is there only 2 full-time staff?
That's it. Yep.
Why is the change in salaries $143,000?
It's about 70 grand ish or so, based on FICA, Medicare, state tax dollars, and health insurance.
Not, and that's in parentheses. I guess I'm confused.
It's a negative. Sorry, it's a negative. That's a reduction of full-time staff.
Okay.
$143,000 reduction in full-time
And
staff,
what was that reduction due to?
taking them out of the budget.
Oh, the full-time?
Yes.
Okay.
So sorry, I'll re-say that. I
Well-
put in the budget this year, I'm gonna call it my worst case scenario financially, not worst
Okay.
case scenario as in operations or worst case scenario that the council can decide. I put in the budget for worst case scenario financially would be if we went and paid our paid on call staff $30 an hour and did not have full-time staff. It's a total increase in that budget of 167 grand.
Yep.
Because I'm taking away the full-time staff, which is $143,000, I'm adding 156 grand for our paid-on-call staff to pay them $30 an hour. But then the main thing is we have to increase the state aid dollars that are given because we can't take those in here and use them for health insurance, or sorry, para for future retirement for our firefighters. We have to pay that to the relief, and that's then just a pass-through.
Did you check on para?
I did not. I've not heard back from para yet, but I will most certainly follow up with them, so.
I have another question. So the change in the salary and benefits for the paid on call, that's on top of what we already have budgeted for the paid on call? That's an increase, correct? Or that's the total dollars for that?
That is an increase based on currently in our budget for 25, so this is kind of a little backstory that Stephanie and Sarah wouldn't know, is that for 25, we put in the budget to have 2 full-time staff members and then the reduced number of paid-on-call staff, all paid at $30 an hour. And that was as of July 1st,
July
right?
1st.
Yep, July 1st was the planned date, because we figured it would take 6 months for that relief association to dissolve. So as of July 1st, we put in there and said, okay, you're gonna make 17 an hour, again, this is general for general firefighter, 17 an hour from January 1 to June 30. July 1 through the end of the year, you'll make $30 an hour. So that change and increase is because we're taking next year and saying the whole year you get paid $30 an hour for your paid on call staff. But we're not gonna pay full-time staff, we will not hire the full-time staff, which is then a reduction of $143,000.
And the state aid is, explain that again?
So the state aid dollars have to, if you have a fire relief, you have to put the dollars from the state aid, which are coming from insurance costs, insurance premiums that are paid on people's homes.
Yep.
Those have to go towards retirement of the firefighter. So we cut the whole check, we get the whole check in and we cut it right out. In 2025, we said, okay, we'll use those dollars to pay out some of the relief, because it'll be 6 months of the relief work that they had. And then July 1 to the end of the year, we'll utilize those dollars to pay their para, which Councilmember Henderson has mentioned, that paying their para essentially putting that towards retirement, but we don't have to pay it out to the relief dollars. We get to utilize that towards our employer portion of their para state para-state retirement. Similar to what would be like with the chief himself working here full-time, he's not part of the relief, but the employer pays 17.7% of his salary, similar to the Chief Enga, to have him as an employee here. We pay 17.7% of their salary to the state for their retirement. So that was the goal, to do it for the fire department paid on call staff. So that's why there's an increase there this year, because it was not included in the budget in '25.
I feel dumb, but
Not dumb.
I thought the state $8,
Yes.
you said it was paid by insurance, and it's a pass-through.
It is a pass-through.
So then why is it affecting our budget? If we just get it and pass it, why does it affect our budget?
So in '25, we budgeted taking the dollars in as a revenue source, but we did not budget spending them out directly, because we were going to utilize those dollars towards their retirement.
Okay.
And by their retirement doesn't cover 100% of that. I'll use 125 as an example.
Okay.
It might cover 50 grand of that. The other 75,000 goes towards Fire Chief Hendrickson and Assistant Chief Ostrom to pay for their paras as well, because it doesn't specifically say it has to be for only paid on call staff. It has to be for firefighters' retirement. That's all it says.
Okay.
And so historically, we've always had just paid it right to the fire relief, because that covers their, their retirement, their $3,250 per year pension benefit that they receive by working at the city. But by having everyone in the same bucket of money with para, we can then offset some of the chief's costs and the assistant chief's costs with full-time staff. Instead of paying it to the relief, we are able to offset their costs.
So, I guess I'm still kind of,
I'm still muddy.
I'm still buddy on that.
Okay.
Yeah, if that's showing as a plus,
Yep.
where's the expense? Where's the increase in the minus? Does that make
Increase in
sense?
the minus.
I mean, if there's an increase in state aid dollars, $125K, that's not going into the budget.
The revenue comes in still, and then it's just an expense on the line item budget, versus this year in '25, it is not on the line item budget.
So are you saying that because we didn't budget for paying into their retirement for this last half of the year, that we're making that back up? I guess that's where I'm stuck. So, because we thought they would be, or the movement seemed like they would be in para,
Yep.
but because they weren't, we now have to replace that. Is that what you're saying? That's kind of where I'm stuck. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
But if in the budget,
If I'm following you properly, I think the answer is yes.
so it's all the same bucket of money though, right? So like the two full-time didn't move forward, so that money should still be there, right? In the fire department's budget, so why is that money not then
So now that's
shifted?
being shifted, so now instead of, so to your point.
I'm just trying to figure out what we're saying.
In 2025, if we're not gonna move forward with the full-time people, those dollars are then going to be reallocated out of the full-time dollars of salaries into paying for that relief dollars. So the chief doesn't get an extra, we used 115 for this year's guess, because we don't know what the number's gonna be. The chief doesn't get an extra $115,000 to spend in his expenditures number. That gets taken out of his full-time staff and put into the line item for state aid dollars to be cut to the relief.
Okay, so then I have another backup question to that. I'm fine, like I'm not beating up the $30, I'm fine with that. I don't really not good voting on that. But the change in salaries and benefits for the paid on call staff, that's a number that's based on amount of firefighters going to how many calls.
Yep.
Is that something that we get to see broken farther? Is it just like, here's the item and that's it? Or do we get to see like,
You
how
can
many?
see it if you'd like to, yeah.
Thought that was, you said that was based on the call model, or
Yep.
on the on-call model.
Yep.
So that's the.
So it's like.
That's not the
we look at-
calls, that's.
We look at
Right, but when-
number of calls, how many firefighters go to the call, training times, public education time, maintenance night. We look at all the nights that they're here, they get paid, and say, okay, this many firefighters show up for this many firefighters, yeah, I think it was 5, I think we used, or 6 number.
6.5.
6.5 firefighters per call, and there's X number of calls, that's times by $30 an hour gets you this number. Plus training nights is gonna be everybody's here, times by $30 an hour, times by number of training nights, and public education. I mean, we can share how we got the number.
No, I hear you, but I'm just wondering, and
Okay, I guess I got confused. That's not based on the being in-house on call.
Yes.
What is? Well, then why do the calls matter?
Because the number of calls are gonna dictate how many dollars we have towards so if I say 600 calls versus 800 calls, I gotta figure out how many dollars I gotta have available. So we said next year's projected number,
But-
730 calls times by 6.5 firefighters times by $30 an hour.
so no, that's not
But you
planning
may or
on.
may not have 6.5 firefighters.
You might not have 6.5
If you
firefighters.
get to a scheduled deal where you
Yep.
don't have 6 or 10 showing up.
Yep.
Or 2, or whatever the
Okay,
number
so,
is.
so we're not talking about scheduled on call.
No.
We're talking
so-
about the model we have
Right,
right
yeah,
now.
the model
And
we
where
have
does
currently.
currently.
6.5
now.
come from? We just see
No.
data that was
That's what he's
4.5.
talking about right now.
Yeah, what we have.
No, it
right
said
now.
5 to 10.
Right,
That might change.
That was the number on the
Yeah,
part.
scheduled program.
correct, but I guess
Okay.
I'm poking at the elephant.
Which element?
The elephant of the paid on call, not paid on call.
Okay.
Someone being here during the day, multiple days, if we're able to pay for that, I'm guessing why do we need that increase? And why are we not just asking for a part-time position, is my question.
I don't know.
I guess I'm not, just to
I-
clarify, so maybe this will help Stephanie, I don't
Yeah,
know.
hopefully.
So I gave Zach 4 different scenarios. So we gave it $17 an hour today, so like we operate today. That times the 730 calls and all the other stuff. Then we went to $30 an hour. Again, no change in staff, just the $30 an hour. And then we went to a duty crew model with no full-time staff
Okay.
at $30 an hour. And then the last one was 2 full-time, basically the model that we had presented. And so the most expensive one, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Yep.
is the way we operate today at $30 an hour. Hence the increase.
Yes.
So that's
And that-
what this is.
And that's what this is. And the reason why I put that in there is because I want to show you worst case, and again, worst case scenario
Budget.
financially. Because if you say this is a change we want to do this way, say it's Scott's point is he wants to say duty crew all the way, that way we don't have 6.5 people showing up. That's a reduction, and it's about, rough numbers, about 50 grand. And it might be even more than that, depending on, I took out and figured out that we could, I'm guessing that para will allow us, if we have a duty crew model, we could utilize the state aid dollars. So I took out $54,000 of that, and we'd be able to reduce the line items budgets differently. But again, I put in worst case scenario in the budget because I don't know what the direction of council is going to be.
Are we able to see those 4 plans?
Yep. Happy to
Because
share.
I would like to see the breakdown if possible.
Yeah, I have it in front of me here. I'm happy to send it out.
That would be great. I just feel like this has been a very, like, we've talked about it, and we're kind of all got all of these different, it was just nice to see the
Yep.
numbers.
Sure.
That 156 is based on $5,200 for the year, 5217 to be exact. If you go to a duty crew schedule type thing, like what I have talked about a little bit,
Yeah, so if we have no, duty crew with no full-time is 4,420 hours a year.
but you can, and I, don't get me wrong, this can change, certainly. If you go to having 2 guys on, just about 24/7, the only thing I don't know is how you fix this Saturday and Sunday, that's a crapshoot. I have no, that's 1,274 hours a year. So you can shave off 3,000 hours off of that. Now, plus any real big calls, you're gonna have more people coming, so that number's not gonna be accurate. You may have 5, 6 people coming on certain occasions to where maybe all of a sudden you got another 400 or 500 hours in there.
Can I ask you a question? You're talking staffing like you have like a shift you sign up for, or
Yep.
you're just telling them you're gonna be here? Because I will let you know that at $30 an hour, that's not putting bread on my table, and so, like, it's gonna be really hard for you just to tell, some are retired or have time during the day, but it's really hard for you to say, hey, Travis, sorry, this is your shift, you're working,
1 day a week. That's what I
So-
thought, that's what I figured out.
is he gonna take PTO from his full-time job? I don't know, I'm not trying to push
No.
back on you, but I don't know that you need 5 people here.
Two. Just two.
You got 2,
No, he's not here at 6 o'clock at night though.
right?
I mean,
What
he
are
can
your,
be.
what are your schedules?
But that's,
my
that's what
i-
I thought you
idea-
meant during the day. I'm
Yeah,
confused.
no,
Can you say more?
this was my thought. What you're trying to do is you already have 2 people here during the day till 5 o'clock. Now, he might be gone 3:30 one day and then all of a sudden maybe you don't have 5 or 2. I was looking at covering from 5 to midnight and then midnight to 7. Now, I've been told that midnight to 7, there's not much going on all the time. So somehow or another, to me, you gotta cover those 14 and a half hours somewhere. I don't know how you do it. And I would say, Pete, Tom, Dick, and Harry, you guys pick which day of which one 7.25 hour shift out of the week can you handle? So you go to 26 guys and you figure out, how do I get 20 shifts out of them 26 guys? 4 guys for each day.
You're going overnight hours. Don't you have to have sleeping quarters then? Like, how does that change your?
Midnight, or 5
If
to
you're-
7. 5
well,
to 7.
midnight-
I don't know how you do the midnight to 7. That's something that can get worked out. I don't know how you do it.
Scott, just to clarify, are you saying that staff would be here from midnight to 7?
Well, when you and I talked, I don't know if that you need that guy from from midnight to 7. Granted, you get a faster response time, and I get that.
Yep, no.
I understand that. However, if you don't necessarily need that guy, and we're just talking mainly for medicals, maybe the 12 midnight to 7, maybe the guy doesn't have to be here, but he's got to be available.
So you're talking response teams. We used to do those.
Right.
They were 10 p.m.
But
to
your 5 to
6 a.m.
7, your 5 to midnight guy, and this was Gary's point, you don't just necessarily pay that guy to be available. Maybe in order to help with maintenance, you have him here for 3 hours out of that, or 2 hours out of that day. So then you're getting some of your maintenance value out of him. And in my opinion, you pay that guy 2 or 3 hours to be available that day. I would have no problem paying.
I don't want to go down too far down the road.
Yeah,
Like,
we will
yeah.
hammer this
Yep.
kind of
Yeah,
detail,
yep.
but right
Yep.
now, this is worst case.
This is worst case scenario. Yes, this is worst case financial. Again, I
But-
say worst case, and I'm gonna say financial scenario, not because
Yes.
Most
it's worst-
expensive.
Most
Oh, yes.
expensive.
This is the most
Yes.
expensive
Yes.
option.
Yes. I want to talk about fire department, but I want to make sure we get to the other things too.
Yeah.
So we will have more conversations on the fire department overall.
Go ahead.
So I know you have a question, but
Well,
I just don't want to derail us too
Right,
far in the
right.
fire department stuff because
Spend
it's
an hour and a half on this.
I get
We will,
it.
yeah.
I'm well aware.
We will have to hammer this quite a bit. But
yes, but I guess
Just say your question.
I am, and I'm not trying to start World War III, but I'm struggling with the change in the paid on call staff because right now, out of those dollars, we essentially have a part-time position that we're paying out of those dollars that isn't actually on the books as a part-time position.
Yep.
And that's an admin position, is from what I understand. And so I guess my question is why add it to the part-time and not just, why are we not just
Already-
adding an
already add an admin.
yeah, adding an admin position, whatever that would be, like a part-time position? Because right now, baked in there, tucked up tight, is a position that we're currently paying out of the paid on-call dollars. And so I'm just like, I would like it to be out in the open and like to have a job description and be a hired position if we're gonna do that instead of
Correct.
baking it in there, doing admin things when there's no way to measure the success of the position, there's no way to measure like how much more do you need, does it need to then transition to a full, like that kind of stuff, you can't have those metrics if you don't know that it's actually happening.
Sure.
Because we know it's happening, but it's the elephant we don't talk about.
We didn't always know what was happening. I didn't know we had that person.
Well, it's been a few years.
It's
or
been
more.
a
I
couple,
understand
yes,
that.
so that's what I'm saying
It's not
is,
public though.
right.
It's not public in this room.
The paid on call position that we've had. So we had Jason Olasky. Now we have Peyton Barthel, and they were both like, I would say they were helping out and assisting with other duties of inspection such. Peyton's role isn't, she's inspections too, but she's doing more health stuff and EMT type things
She's
just because of her.
EMS Council's contact,
yeah,
yes,
kind
because
of.
we're a medical unit now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Different of direction goals, but I mean, in
But
total, it's.
it would be nice to
Yeah.
have a job description and
Sure.
have that be a paid position where it is a hired position. It's not a
Appointed?
appointed, and there's a way to measure success and growth, and then as jobs and things change and it gets to be more time intensive, that could grow into an actual full-time.
Yeah, I don't think it was necessarily meant out to be a appointed position. I think it was meant to be starting off with is we needed more people to respond to calls, and so that's why we used the 6.5 measure of, okay, that's how many calls we're gonna have on most time, but if we don't have 6.5 people show up, we have these shortfalls, and I think that's how the position kind of started. With inspection times and just duties that were assigned to the chief and the assistant chief at the time was, how do we help with those times? Okay,
It was
we.
presented to council as a inspector position.
Yes.
So he was doing basically Greg's
role.
role.
Greg Cruz at the time.
Greg Cruz that came
Yep.
in and did that. So
Yep, I
they
remember
still
that.
continue to do that. And then the other thing is from the records, so what Jason was working on was our records management system, our transition to that. So that's a lot of that work has gone into making sure that we have all of our inventory and then all of the truck checks and everything that's got put into that. So that was a project that is pretty much getting wrapped up now with getting everything set up with different trucks and whatnot. But that position has been out there amongst council from an inspection perspective when those are needed, as well as to work with the RMS stuff. Had Jason not left, then it would have been Jason continued in that role. And then the idea was that this past January, we would have put that into, they were going to fall into potentially one of these full-time positions that we've been working towards.
I
It's kind of
figured,
the
yeah.
role in that capacity.
No, and that makes sense, like that feels like that would be the progression. It would just be nice to have a job description and have it actually be a position.
Sure.
Because if not, it feels backdoorish, and I don't mean like, I'm not trying to like be rude about it, but it feels like if we know we're paying a part-time person, we should have a part-time position. It should be a laid out slot. This is what it is. Otherwise, it feels a lot like, and the optics of it maybe is more what I'm looking at, where nobody really knows what that person's doing. Nobody knows how to measure the success. And so like that's the big thing, is knowing, is your job description, this is how you measure success, these are the things that you're working on, and then it can evolve from there. Because of wrapping it into the paid on call makes the paid on call model look, in my opinion, more expensive, when really tucked in there is a part-time position on top of the paid on call positions.
Well, we're utilizing dollars because, to Scott's point, is I don't know exactly how many people are going to show up. So if we have a call where it's the stub toe call that Zach and I like to use, I really only need probably 2 people on that call. But we end up having 10 people on that call. So we have to over-exaggerate a lot of that. So that's where those dollars come from, is those, what-if scenarios, if you will.
No, I hear you, but
I think I get your point, is though. Yep.
yeah, the
You
point
you just
is,
like it to be explained out
I just
in
want
more
it to be
detail.
transparent. That's
Yep.
it. Just
Yep.
out in the front. And
And we can note that, and I don't see it anywhere in here, so unless we don't hit 7:30 or 6.5 people per call, it's not in our salary budget numbers we have for 26. So I don't know what that means or looks like, but again, just looking at
but if
next
it's
year's budget.
if it's an increase of 156,000, it's already baked in there.
That's taking this year's numbers or that's taking next year's projected call volume of 730. Now, if we don't think 730 is the right number to use for projected call volume, we can lower it, and then that would come down for 156.
So yeah, then I guess my question is, moving into the next year, are we anticipating not needing that admin work then? Because if it's not in here,
So the change for next year, excuse me, or what Zach and I have talked about, is getting a part-time inspector that has the ability to, and this is going to be a stipend position. So a stipend position would be $500 a month. Those dollars would come from cost savings, and actually probably significant cost savings depending upon the person that we hired to do the job, where we would be able to take back the costs that we incur, or the city incurs from inspections of fire alarm inspection, and that. So then those dollars would stay with the city versus paying Metro West $80 an hour. And then that person then would still get their regular paid-on-call pay, or whatever the model we have. And then
And
they
the
get.
stipend. That
and
makes
the
a lot of
stipend,
sense.
And the $500. So that's what we're moving towards, but I've been waiting to kind of see where we end up with.
And that position will be done by council, so.
Yeah, no, it would just be nice to see, like,
Yep.
that makes a lot
So
of sense, like,
that's- so that's
that,
where it's in now, yep.
okay, sorry, and then again, I'm not trying to beat anybody up or come hard at anyone, I'm just trying to understand,
Mm-hmm.
and just wanna
When we
see.
do that, it would be nice to know what Metro S hooks us for on that stuff too.
Yeah, to
Oh,
see
it's,
the
80 or
savings
85
there.
bucks an hour.
Is it?
85 bucks an hour, yep.
Yeah, that would be a really great metrics to have, that cost savings to do that, like, to be able to look at and
And that's
say,
what the
like,
chief and I
this
talked
is-
about this last year.
Yeah, no, and that would be great, it just, if we don't talk about it, we don't know, and so, like,
Agreed?
thank you.
So
Try to be
that-
open and transparent about as much.
So that decrease,
It's not in here, because I'm not sure what
Right.
it's gonna be, so it could be, there could be another reduction again. When we put together the scenario, I always say, what's the max, and we can always come down from there,
Yep.
so.
Yeah, and again, it's just hard to see with
Yep.
like the very
It is very,
blanketed, like, this
Yep.
is what, I'm like, well, what does that mean? So
Yep.
I'm glad we had this
I-
discussion.
I-
I feel better, so thank you for clarifying.
yeah, because the idea is not to keep the council out of the weeds, but at the same point, I want council to focus on steering the train, because if you're dealing with all the details behind, you're never gonna be able to steer the train the right way. You're gonna be worried about how much coal's going into the thing, and this is that, and that's my job, so. I try to use an analogy, it might be a horrible one, but worried about what train cars on there and whatever
Generally
else, so.
speaking, you have to be on the track, so
Yeah,
not a
so-
whole lot of steering
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that one.
so. Okay, so public works, let's move to public works, so, increase of $80,000. Some of that is related to, or most of it's related to salaries and benefits. And then the other part is that we're looking to move two part-time positions into one full-time employee.
how is that only an increase of 13?
So the other part is in parks. So it's about.
Yep, so that's
so
one.
what- Yeah, that's one employee, but we took two part-time employees and moved them into one full-time employee. So it's a slight bump in wage, but the biggest thing is health insurance. It's $22,000 of that.
Oh, so it's split between that?
Yes, it's
Okay, I
split
get it.
between public works and parks, and that's based on what they're working on. So I think this position is 75% parks, 25% public works based
Yeah,
on.
okay, so it's,
But the other ones are operating supplies, street maintenance. Parks is the same thing, increase of 37. Most of it's related to current salaries. Some of that, again, is related to that full-time, taking two part-time positions, making it in one full-time employee. Administration, the last one, is based on changes of health change in health insurance, salaries and benefits, and then the other part of the HR manager position. So if you go those two together, it's about 110,000. 29,5 and 73 is 105,000 a year, somewhere in there, give or take.
so,
Okay, sorry, you want to go back?
yeah,
Okay,
okay, so the 73,
73 in city clerk. That's one more slide back. Sorry, 73 HR. Yep.
yeah. That's only part of an HR position?
Yes. So we're not looking for a generalist position. We want more experience in that. At least from city staff's perspective, is that we have nobody with HR experience in this city.
Yep. So we're looking at.
Amy and I are kind of I've self-assigned Amy to doing HR duties, but she is not an HR professional.
I know, that's.
And
why
neither
we
am I.
Brought in a firm, but.
Yep.
So really, you're talking about 100,
105,000. Yep.
105, yeah.
You got
You're
it.
adding to 40 and.
yeah, okay.
Yep.
Yep. You got it.
Okay.
Last one, these are just very, very small ones, but again, revenue is looking to increase about 30 grand next year just based on historical trends in revenue. So that's actually an offset to the levy, so that's a reduction. Increase for activity center is based on $8,000 in operating supplies, trying to do a few more concerts maybe next year and some other things that we can possibly do with programs as we continue to move forward. Council, an increase in subscriptions and memberships, central services, contingency, emergency management, animal control, and IT. IT's reduction of $4,500. We ended up not needing as many dollars as I thought we were good, so based on trends, I'm not continuing to increase IT or even keep it the same, so. But other than that, roughly about $10,000 each one of those departments, total. So we'll break it down the levy in dollars in a different light, just because it's good to look at. We have requirements based on union contracts and contracts that have already been adopted. It says salary increases, that's $459,100. That's based on health insurance, which matches a union contract. State paid leave, so that's everybody in this room is going to have to pay state paid leave next year. Not sure if you're aware of it or not, but it's going to be 0.044% of your salary that you have to put into a bucket and pay for people who need to take paid leave off. That's going to be run by the state. We are doing the minimum, which is this employer pays half and the employee pays half, so that is our portion. I think it's 0.44%. I think that's the number, so it's 0.0044. So that's gotta be added this year. Mid-year hires, which we mentioned, in police, and then required union contracts, which are already done by LELS.
That 459 is all your new hires? HR, and-
Nope, nope, salary increases that are required. This is if we only kept the same employees we have this year to next year, we have to pay $459,000 more dollars. That's based on union contracts for police and LELS. The mid-year hires we just hired at the last council meeting. State paid leave that's required by law, and health insurance increases which is paid for or negotiated by union contracts. Recycling services, that's based on the contract that we had, that's a $70,000 increase. The two planned items, which is the ladder truck, that's about 300 grand. Park capital is 15.
So for capital, that's new capital money.
Yep, that's new capital money.
So
But
last year, we had a big jump in capital too. That's
You had a
carried forward, right?
you had a $100,000 increase for the ladder truck last year that you went for. So
But-
the $300,000 would be on top of the 100.
But there was also the front loader, the front end loader.
Those dollars are looking at different CIP items, and we'll talk about those in
It
July.
was, yep, but it was still capital spending.
Yeah, so this is an increase that we had planned on for so every year we looked at it and said, okay, can we keep the same number of dollars? And this was done 2 or 3 years ago, I think. I tried to say, okay, we want to, capital equipment can change about who's purchasing. It doesn't matter who's purchasing it as in overall city, but we want to keep our capital equipment dollars every year the exact same, so that it's $1 million, for example. It's $1 million this year, $1 million next year, $1 million the following year after that. It's always $1 million. Doesn't matter if Marty buys a front end loader and 2 plow trucks, or if the chief buys a fire truck. Doesn't matter. It's $1 million every single year. Last year we said we want to add $100,000 to that to pay for the ladder truck. So that was in 25. 26, that $100,000 still exists today, so it's going to be $200,000 for the ladder truck at the end of the year if we keep the same levy number. We're looking at increasing that by 300 grand. We'd have $400,000 for the ladder truck this year. That was the plan. Continue to increase by 300 grand every year to be able to roll and snowball the money, similar to like a payment of a credit card, to be able to pay cash for that ladder truck when it came in 27, 28? 28. To pay cash for it. It's about 300 grand every year, just rolling it forward. So if we did this plan, which you had adopted or at least looked at from the capital perspective, we'd have 100 from last year. We'd obviously have 100 right away at the beginning of the year this year for 26. And by this year and last year, I get everyone really confused. And then 300 grand additional. So we'd have $500,000 total saved up for the ladder truck if we were to do this plan
Yep, I guess.
at the end of 26.
What I'm getting at though is last year, we had a bump in capital.
I don't remember that, but I can
was-
look at it.
I think there was almost 300 for the front end loader.
it was more than that.
And there was another 150 for a mower.
I don't know.
About 330,000, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right.
And then the mower added
Yeah, that's,
150.
the mower was 146.
So,
Yep, so in 24, we went from 750
yep.
to $1 million. That's
Yep.
what we went to
Okay,
last year in
so-
capital.
So
Yep,
that was a 200. So,
$250,000 increase, yep,
so assuming that that's our baseline,
yep.
there's another 250 in there that's unspent.
Nope, because we moved and said we're gonna, instead of buying a front end loader this year, we're gonna finish paying off our engine tender that we bought with the $475,000 of replacement of tanker 11 that we had budgeted for this year.
Oh, I think you lost me. Okay.
So the goal from my perspective was to keep the dollars the exact same in the capital every single year.
Except we
So,
did, last year we jacked it up.
and that, the reason we jacked it up is to keep it similar every single year. To say it's $1 million. It was 750 before.
So we jacked it up last year so that
Yep.
it would stay the same this year.
Yep.
But
Stay
yeah,
the same. But then there's additional part, which is the ladder truck that we had every single year, looking at paying for that with
Wants to
cash.
add more to the ladder truck.
It's the same ladder truck.
Well, it's,
No, it's the same ladder
Oh,
truck.
yes.
It's more money.
But it's-
You want to add 200
I'm
grand.
just saying it's more than that though, because it's the 250 that we increased it by last year.
Yeah.
So we went up by 250 last year,
Yep, yep.
which means if we did nothing, we would have an extra 250 in there.
But that 250 is now paying for the tanker your engine tender that we bought, that was part of the funding source. When we came to council 2 or 3 years ago with the chief, we broke down, here's all we're gonna pay for the engine tender when the tanker shot the bed. We said we have to get a new tanker, but our engine's also bad, so we're gonna sell off an engine to pay for that, which we got 400 grand for. Oh boy, I got my wrong sheet here.
That was 4.25 or something like that.
Yep, so we got 427 for the engine. We sold off utility 21 to pay for it. That was 120 grand. We said we're gonna budget for the tanker replacement still in 26 for $475,000. And then we're gonna have one-timed our essentially $100,000 over 2 years to pay for it in funding sources to pay cash for that thing when it came in. So the 475, so the 330 for the front end loader just got moved into the replacement of the tanker. It's really hard to follow without you guys looking at a sheet. It's impossible for me to explain this to you guys. It's just not gonna happen. Your baseline, Dennis, is saying 750 is the number. That's your baseline.
Yep.
And my baseline is saying it's $1 million is the number. So that's where the difference comes into play. And we can talk about that in capital planning, but that was what the breakdown of levy dollars from last year's perspective was. Is
You're
every
saying
year.
that 30% increase?
Yep.
Or what was it, 25% increase, whatever it was,
Mhm.
is baked in here. Not in these numbers, but this sits on top of that 25%
Yes.
increase.
Yep. You got it.
So
From last
that-
year. Yep. So yes, if I'm following you correctly, we had a 25% increase last year in capital. Yes. And then that same baseline is used this year, and now we're adding 300,000
Right.
to that number.
So in 2 years, we went from 7.25, 750 to 1.3, is what I'm saying. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Yes. Yep. And it's kept in mind. I understand. I mean, we have things that cost money, and we ordered things, and we got to pay for them somehow. So we can either pull out a bond, or we can pay cash for them. And the plan for the council was, let's pay cash for them because we'll utilize the tax capacity over time to utilize them, to pay for it with cash, versus taking out a bond for 10 years on a piece of equipment, which we can do that too. And then park capital 15, and then elections is 44,000. So we have to do things, and again, you could take the 300 grand out of there if you'd like, Mayor, the other numbers. We're at 888, you take away the 300, you're at 588. But that means that $300,000 has to come from later on. We just kick the can down the road essentially with the ladder truck. And requested amount from council for an 8% increase was $777,000. So to keep our tax rate the same, we need 777. We're at 888. Take away the 300, you're at 588 with no changes in anything last year. That doesn't mean operating supplies, that means no subscriptions and memberships. There's no professional development, that's no new employees. That's just status quo as we sit today. So staff went through and said, what else could we do? What could we save? What could we adjust to help this off overall? The ones on the left are required based on just the general fund alone. So I only did the general fund. I didn't touch capital equipment at this time. 573 is required. And we came up with, we could do about $325,000 worth of cuts based on hiring people at mid-year, reducing professional services for comp plan, but that means comp plan work's getting kicked down the road. We could reduce our part-time police budget a couple dollars by hiring that full-time officer. We can reduce our engineering estimate and hiring the full-time fire staff. 2 mid-year hires. That would cut about $325,000. 491 is left.
What is that?
Oh, sorry.
What is
Sorry.
that job hire for?
If we hire the full-time fire staff, our general fund dollars go down by 111 grand.
Oh, all right.
So it's a reduction of dollars because we're able to reutilize those fire state aid dollars. That's the main difference. We obviously have to add in health insurance, so that's the difference in an increase in difference between 125 and 111. There's some changes in when, so certain employees don't pay Medicare. So if you're a fire full-time employee, you don't pay Medicare costs of 6.2%. That's only paid on every other employee. So that's why it's not quite one for one for the 22 grand, and the 125 should be 103. But you add back some because you don't pay Medicare on full-time staff that are fire or police. So that's the $8,000 difference there. And the 491 is broken down mostly as you see. I mean, that's 90% of it. police officer, professional services, supplies, professional development, repair and maintenance, HR manager position, public works employee, associate planner. So those are based on half-year hires for the HR manager and associate planner position, full year for the police officer, full year for the public works employee.
What are the new tax dollars coming in from this year compared to last year?
In percentage-wise, tax capacity number?
No, just the property taxes that people are paying. How much more are we getting this year?
We don't
from
get
last?
anything.
Well,
Well, sure you do. You get,
yeah, we'll get
You're gonna get-
35% times the capacity, or we'll get,
We don't get any more dollars though. Like if you have $7 million this year in the levy,
yep,
and we say, how many more dollars are coming in next year? The answer is $7
oh,
million.
it's whatever we set it to.
Yeah, whatever you set it to. So if you say, we don't get any additional dollars, I think that's what the biggest misconception about government is that 500 homes go in, we're gonna get so many more dollars in those homes. No. The answer is that your $7 million of levy just gets split across those people, so everyone pays less.
But you do if you keep the
Fine.
tax rates.
If the tax levy goes up, then we get more dollars. To your question is, if you approve $1 million levy increase, now we get $1 million more dollars to operate with, which means everyone's taxes might
Are
go
you
up. or
talking
down.
about for this year?
for 2026
Oh,
Last year was
2026, it's what we
8.3.
set it to.
for our budget. That's what we spend.
That's additional increase you're talking,
Yeah.
for a levy increase, yep.
And there's more people paying taxes in 26 than there was in 25.
Yes,
But it'll be distributed
but it gets distributed evenly.
evenly. Bottom line is, whatever we set the levy is what it,
That's how much dollars we get in. Yeah,
That's
so
what it is.
You could put 1,000 homes in here, 15,000 homes in here, or 2 homes in here. The same dollars come into us, whether it's whatever you guys set the levy is, that's how many dollars we get. Doesn't matter how many homes go in, how many businesses go in here. If you set it at $7 million, it's $7 million, and that's what we have to work with. Whether that goes to capital, operations, future planning, whatever it may be. We don't get a nickel more unless the council approves an increase in the levy. Which is what we're looking for, or here tonight to discuss, is what does that levy number look like? And so, based on these required numbers, and again, I use required because that's what the plan was, is the $300,000 for the ladder truck. Now you can say, we don't want to do the ladder truck, we'll kick it down the road, that's fine. But then we're at $588. So we have to increase the levy $588,000 just to keep the status quo. If you don't want to do that, we have to fire people. Because that's 90% of that increase, is $459,000, so we gotta get rid of people. Which I'll tell you right now, I don't think any one of the department heads, including myself, would say, yep, cut somebody, because we have lots of extra time on our hands.
well,
But it's true.
but he does.
Exactly. And as we get more residents that come in here, and I will tell you that Marty's probably the number one guy who gets the complaints, maybe Paul and Gary as well, but we have residents that come in here that came from different cities that have more services, and they go, why is my street plowed in 5 minutes? Why don't you have a 2-minute response time? Why don't we have 3 officers on at a time? And we go, we don't have that ability, we can't do it. If we have 2 officers at a domestic violence call, we have 0 officers patrolling the street, and we get constant complaints about traffic levels and speeding and incidents and whatever else, but we have to have 2 officers at a domestic violence call.
When we're looking at the budget or
Those are just examples of it.
yeah,
Same
no,
thing.
just at was the last meeting the meeting before when we had the audit.
Yep.
And it was brought up that there was the plan to get more fines from like speeding tickets, basically.
Yep.
And that didn't happen because the
We didn't have
office.
the officer.
Yes. So I guess my question is, we have a new officer on here. Is the new officer that's currently budgeted for going to be for traffic stops, or is it for just a more, I don't want to say general purpose, but general purpose, I guess?
My goal is, as of right now, is general purpose, because I want to get to 2-car minimums.
Okay.
Right now, we're at 1-car minimums.
Okay,
So you're guaranteed to have 1 cop on in the city at all times.
yeah,
With next year's hire, I'd be able to do 2 cops minimum per shift.
okay,
As of now, we'll have a traffic car for half a year because, well, depending on how fast we get officers off of field training, we might have a traffic cop for a little bit in the transition period, is my goal. My goal is we're up we have tripled the amount of citations. We have not seen the money because we can't guarantee every traffic or citation is going to be $50. Depending on court, judges, everything like that, they can reduce the fine amount whenever they want. So we're not always guaranteed the full amount. But I'm hoping that I can get one officer more time to do traffic with the 2-car minimum approved.
Well, and my goal is not, I don't want to balance our budget on speeding tickets. That's not my goal. I was just curious because there was that conversation, and I wanted to see if this new officer was a continuation of that, or if it was.
That was a goal we had, to be able to do that, because we heard Champlin does that. Essentially, they, again, you know, whenever budget, but essentially they pay for a full officer with the number of tickets that they write, and then, you know, it's like, okay, well, can we get another traffic car to be able to help with that? That helps with our officers on duty. But it also would then offset some of the dollars that it costs, because those officers are expensive. They're not cheap.
Oh, yeah.
But it never came to fruition because, A, most of the fines got written off, and B, they never actually got out and did traffic because we were doing other things with calls.
Yeah.
I know calls for service are way up this year too. And
We lost a couple officers.
Yeah. We've been running short, so the field training for the brand new officer that we're putting on will be about 6 months.
I was, like I said, I just was curious about how that plan had changed and if that was part of this, but,
yeah, I mean, when the chief says minimum of 1, that means that if people are on vacation or sick, it's a minimum of 1.
Yeah.
Most of the time, we have 2 cars on at all times. I mean, like,
Yeah.
90% of the time, we have 2 cars on at all times. Sometimes we have 3, depending on when the sergeants move in, because they're mid-shift, 3
PM to 3 a.m.
Yeah, 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. And we have a 6 to 6 shift right now for most of our police. So, but yeah, like I said, so most of the time we have 2, possibly 3 on at a time, which is the most we've ever had. But when somebody calls out sick or somebody's on vacation, then we have a 1-car minimum for a few hours at a time.
So, I have other questions about, obviously, we can't change it at this point, but the union negotiations, do you
Yes.
negotiate on a 2-year at a time, or,
We have done 2 and 3-year contracts.
Okay.
Typically, we do 2.
okay,
We did do 2 3-year contracts last time, and the reason for that was to get them off of election years.
okay.
Because it's easier to talk about a contract when you have a group of people that's gonna be here versus a group that's gonna be possibly leaving or not leaving. It makes it a little more difficult for
Yeah.
conversations.
I was just, so, because
Yep.
my full-time job, I am in a union, we're negotiate, so I understand, we negotiate with the system office, but then it has to go to the legislature to vote up or down, so like, that makes sense
This
to
is
me.
the exact same process
Yeah.
here, except for,
But-
you're the
Yes.
legislative office.
But that's it's a 2-year contract
Yes.
because the state operates in a 2-year budget. So I think it's a little, that's what I think is a little tricky is we're negotiating 2-year contracts, but we only do a 1-year budget.
Yes.
So that makes it, that adds a layer of complication. I just wanted to,
You are correct.
okay, so,
Which I'll complicate it with this contract because they came in after the budget had already been approved, and I said, you have this many dollars to work with, that's it. So I don't know what else to tell you, but that's what you got.
yeah, okay,
And so their negotiation was, well, that's fine, we'll take that, but then we want more in the back end,
yeah, which is what we're dealing with now.
which is what we're dealing with now of
So
that.
maybe let's not do that again.
Yeah. A $300,000 increase in 1 year for a contract is the most I've ever seen, and so it wasn't ideal.
Yeah, so let's ideally not do that
Yeah.
if we can avoid that.
We also have really good officers, and I will stand behind a lot of our officers that sit here, and it's not like, I mean, we have a good group of
Oh,
people.
yeah. It's just hard from a budget standpoint.
But from a
when
budget
you're
perspective,
budgeting-
it's
Yes,
not great.
Yeah.
I would
And
agree.
also, again, a 2-year contract when you only have a 1-year budget is just, is super challenging for everybody involved, so.
So we just need more direction. Again, I don't think the direction, appreciate the conversation tonight, I think it's been a really good conversation overall. I know you guys got this PowerPoint last night, and I apologize about it being so late, but I met with all the department heads yesterday and said, here's where we're at. I need some help, because I started making cuts and things, and we are a team here, and we need to make sure we operate as a team, so. We're all team players here, and we gotta figure it out. But we're here for any questions if you have any. I know we only got like 5 minutes, but we will have more discussions on the budget. This is obviously just the preliminary one. If you have comments, questions, concerns, you most certainly can always email. Otherwise, we will have another meeting likely. Depending on what's on the next meeting, we can always have a budget work session discussion again at the next council meeting, if that's what the council would like to do. I am not here on July 8th, which is the first council meeting. Appreciate Councilmember Van Assen responding back to say that you guys still want to do the CIP stuff, which is the 300,000 or 250 or numbers that we talked about with yourself, Mayor. And we can do that conversation as well at that meeting. I just will not be here and present, and that's fine. I can rewatch the meeting and get notes from my department heads, but
We can talk about you then.
you can. Talk about me now if you'd like to. As Scott says, as soon as I walk out the room, we just
Start over.
start over again. Yep,
It's not personal, it's business.
yep, 100%. Do you have any specific questions or things that you want department heads to look into specifically while we're all sitting here?
I say you guys gotta look into cutting 10%.
Came up with some. We just go with nothing. Came up with something.
So cutting 10% and bringing it down to 9,
Because you want down to 8% levy increase.
Yep.
I just,
we're at 19.
yeah, we're at 19. And
Yep.
if
Good
you
enough.
want to keep, yeah, there's, based on this, if you keep the plan you have in place for the ladder truck to pay for that with cash, we can't physically do it. I don't know who you're,
It's not
we're
my-
firing somebody.
It's not my concern.
I know. That's fine, but like I said, just want to make sure it's clear.
Well, and to me, it doesn't look like it's an all or nothing for the ladder truck. I guess the question
No,
would be is,
no.
could we just dial that, like, what would the impact be if we dialed it down a little bit?
Sure.
Maybe 150 instead of 300, which is not completely kicking the can down the road, so to speak, but what would that look like? Because that's just my gut reaction is, well,
If we do that, then, yeah, so then any of these, so essentially, if that was the case, and
Yeah.
I'll use an example, we would, yeah, so all of these things would go back to zero.
Wasn't that letter 2.8? Wasn't that the number?
2.4.
Like I said, these just go back to zero, so we get no officer next year.
And the tender that goes with it, how are we paying for that? Is that the,
So the engine tender was a separate purchase. We had said, okay, we're gonna pay for a new tanker in 2026. Let's reutilize those dollars in 2026 and put that towards an engine tender and pay cash for it.
yeah,
We prepaid the cash for it back in 24, 23, because we had enough dollars available and said, we will future levy and collect those in the future levy dollars. And we got a $225,000 reduction,
Yes.
decrease based on paying cash up front. So we decided, okay, why don't we take a reduction because we could pay cash and then we can get that back over time. So it's $475,000, which should be done in 2026. There's not a lot of in 2026, there's not a lot of big purchases on here. There's, again, this is the last year's plan, so I'm just repeating, I don't know if there's any changes from the department heads, we haven't met on that yet, but a brine box, a new truck, a shop floor scrubber, which I think will be down, that's $25,000. The tanker, which is $475, a utility tractor with a V plow, and the replacement of a utility trailer, that's it. So there's not a lot of things to cut in CIP to get your 250 back that you mentioned, Mayor. And then the following year, we have couple more things, and then that's, the big things next year are, we need a new road grader. Maybe we do, maybe we don't, I'm not sure. And then a 1-ton hydraulic sander. 1 ton with
Some of
hydraulic.
those things are gonna move around.
So, and those might move around. So then if that moves around at all, then those, obviously, then we can look at saying, hey, can we reduce and still pay for the ladder truck and reduce capital? So again, this is a whole big puzzle of all putting it all together. So it's not like it's a simple cut and dry thing. If you have specific questions, please let me know.
and I probably should have paid more attention. So Hennepin County has been concerned because of what some of the things on the chopping block from the state budget,
Yep.
which are legally required things. So they're not actually saving any taxes; they're just shifting the tax burden.
Yep.
I haven't.
Nothing for us.
Okay.
We're not talking about anything here.
Okay.
It's all county burden.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, has that all? Do we know what that's gonna? Have we heard how that played out?
I have not heard specifically, but I do know that they got a budget passed last night.
That's what I mean. I
I
haven't.
have not heard all the details of that
Same,
said
that's-
budget.
yeah, okay.
The only thing I've heard for sure is that they did pass a bonding bill.
Okay.
But it included 0 individual projects, so our projects got nixed.
Okay. But that's what I was, because I'm also thinking from a homeowner's perspective, when you get your tax bill, it's sometimes hard to see. And if the county is going to be jacking their rates, I'm not saying that but like, that makes me even more hesitant to like add on to ours if the county is going to be like coming down hard.
So what the county does is now affecting our operations?
I'm not saying it should.
That's what I make sure
but
I understand.
I'm just saying, like, I'm putting myself in my own, like, when I get my tax bill, what my reaction's gonna be, right? Like, and if we have, I'm not saying it should absolutely, like, dictate what we do or don't do, but I do think we have to be cognizant of it. It's a thing, and it matters, and it affects our residents.
I don't want us to look as a city as we have to be the fluctuation for somebody else's problem.
I get that.
And I think that's what we end up always looking at, is we always try to figure out, because the taxpayer sees us first, and we are the
Yes.
first line of people that they see.
Yes.
It's, what can we do to fix things for the taxpayer? And I don't know if that's the best, not saying that that's not the way to look at things, because I'm a resident too, and I have a tax statement.
Yeah, we
that
all
I
get
saw
it.
a gigantic increase
Yes.
last year for, just like everybody else did.
Yeah.
But I didn't blame the city because the county raised their taxes, but at the same point, I understand my tax bill probably better than most.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to say we have to change our operations around or not do something because the county got shifted a burden that came from the state, which then just pushed the burden down to
Yeah.
the county.
I think we should be cognizant
I
of
don't
it.
disagree, we should be cognizant, but
And perhaps start already with communication to our residents, so that if we do wind up having to increase and the county increases and they're going to see a huge increase, I think we need to start communicating that as quickly and like
They
as
will see an
articulately as
increase,
possible.
even if we keep the tax rate
Yeah.
flat.
Yes, but I'm just saying, like, I think we need to be cognizant of how nasty that could wind up being, and then how much communication on our end, because as you said, we're that first line. We're the first people come, and most people don't understand it as well as you do. So, I just think, I'm not saying it will make decisions for us, but I would really like to know what that number is so that I can get my arguments prepared, my PowerPoint prepared for when people come pounding at my door being like, why are my taxes so damn high? So,
We don't have direction yet.
okay.
I have no idea what that looks like.
But my follow-up was, is there a chance that the county might then pass some of those requirements on to us? Okay. Because a lot of it is health and human services
Yes, it
stuff.
is, and that's gonna be
So-
all at the county level.
Okay.
We
We don't have to worry
We've
that.
gotten all of our burden already taken from the county. We had to take on investigations, and we had to take on all kinds of other stuff, and that's been done over time. So,
Okay, but I guess that was my other part is.
they've already shifted all their burden on us that they possibly can.
So there's not more coming our way because of what the state is doing to the county. The county's not gonna turn around and push more into us.
They did take the appraisal costs, which I still want to know
Assessment?
why they did that.
I don't know.
Assessment.
They did
Because
that.
they didn't do that out of the goodness of their heart.
So they could raise their taxes.
I think it's so that they could guarantee who was
They'll
appraising.
bake something in there.
Yeah.
someplace.
Okay, any more questions?
Well, no.
It's never going down.
We will be adjourned if
Thank you.
there are none, we're adjourned. All right.
I don't have any prick marks, that's good.